Relax, sit down. Coming out of PE town. One drink, find a shot. Never mind your liver, get to Gino's spot.
Gino's spot.
Get to Gino's spot.
Gino's spot.
Have a laugh, have a giggle, and exercise your middle. Have a Gino shot.
Gino's shot.
Get to Gino's spot.
Gino's spot.
Get to Gino's spot.
Gino's spot.
Have a laugh, have a giggle, and exercise your middle. Get to Gino's spot.
Gino's spot.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Center Stage.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our special Gino spot. This is not a normal Gino spot. It's on a Monday, which is not normally the case. We normally do Tuesdays, and it will be Tuesday tomorrow. We've got Brad and Ben Peens. He's just released a new song, a youngster, and so we're giving him a chance to drop his song on our show. You know, that's what they say, drop a song. No, we never used to drop songs.
No. Drums on
exactly, drummed on your tracks. Anton Calitz and John Clarke in the studio tonight, and I'm going to be the camera's straight here. We got one camera there, we got one camera there, and we got a camera over there. So you just look wherever you like. But people do we're on and going. So and you can talk to Gary as well. And this is Gino spot. There's no rules here.
Gary would prefer I don't talk.
But thank you for joining us, and please share the link because this is an important story we're going to tell tonight. John is busy in the last throes of writing the book about Molly Backburn, and I know that tonight you're going to discuss the whole thing, the whole journey. John's journey, which ties into Anton's journey as well with the song.
But it ties into the Molly Backburn journey, and it intersects, like you were saying earlier.
Yes, with a juncture. And you know, John, Anton has been. I've known Anton since 1982, 1980. I think we were junior. Oh, it was actually 79. You're right. And Anton has popped up at junctures.
Every bad moment in your life.
In my life. Anton has been there at the moments. There's those moments in my life. The first band, got married. Anton was there working for a lawyer who did our anti-nuptial contract. You know, it's crazy. All these moments in our lives. And so here he is. Here he is at a juncture in yours as well, popping up and saying, how's it? So thank you to our sponsors, obviously Fitch and Leeds, been with us for 5 years now. And we've got Pinion, who are accountants, who are bloody marvelous. They are Africa's leading agri-advisory. So they do the farmers. They help the farmers out and make sure that they're paying their taxes and doing their things, doing what's needed for the farms. Also, Fat Cat's Catering will be coming tomorrow night because she doesn't even know we've got a show tonight. That's Grace. I know. It's Tuesdays normally, guys, you know. So this week we've got a show on Monday and on Tuesday. We've got a double feature for you this week. But yeah, so I'm just basically introducing you guys, and you've got to go for it tonight. This is your show tonight. Yes. Absolutely. Also, I don't know if I've forgotten. Amobia, our internet provider, and Nicola and the guys from Amobia, PE-based guys, they've also helped us with the internet.
Are you going to be much longer?
Not much longer.
We've got lots to talk
I know you've got. This could be a long show, ladies and gentlemen. It could be a long one.
Making it longer.
Anton's got his guitar here ready to go, and
forever.
And we're ready to introduce John Clarke. I think Gary, we've got our little introductory video. Can you play it for John? I think we need to do that.
Yeah.
John, we've got a special interview.
Welcome to the show. Now it's your time to shine. We're gonna have a lekker chat tonight. Another good time.
And there we go. Good. We're on and ready to rock and roll.
Yes.
So John Clarke, I think we need to have some sort of introduction from yourself, because you are a sociologist, I believe.
No, social worker.
Social worker. Social worker.
He's several things as I am too.
Yes.
Songwriter, musician, teacher, failed lawyer and developing alcoholic.
I'm not sure that.
John is a mixture of things, including a social worker.
Social worker, yeah.
And a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And he's an author. He's not
Yes.
as well, and as he's given me the privilege of the last 24 hours of giving me the illusion of telling an author what to do. I had that for about 5 minutes, and I realized that I'm not in his league whatsoever. So.
Is that a good enough description, John?
Well, I guess I'd rather when we have our first guest, Senegal Zakulu can probably, and he knows me better than I know myself. So why don't we just kick off with that very atmospheric piece of The Place of the Promise. I mean,
Yes.
I was privileged to find myself, by circumstances, of drawn into the struggle of the Amadiba community on the Ponderland Wild Coast to stop the mining of the ancestral lands. And it was because in 2000, I went down there in a horse trail, and I felt like I'd stumbled into paradise. And it was a moment of re-enchantment for me because I was getting a little bit disillusioned. I mean, South Africa's, the Rainbow Nation idea and the story was beginning to fade a bit because there'd been the arms deal, there'd been a bit of, Nelson Mandela had resigned and Thabo Mbeki came on, and I was just feeling like the promise of this new South Africa was beginning to fade. And I found myself down the Wild Coast, re-enchanted with this beautiful place. So let's play that piece, and then you can see why. Like it's beyond description.
Yes.
It's experiential, and there's some music to it there, which Claire Johnson and Jeff Marlin
lovely.
contributed. Yeah.
Of course, Mango Groove. There we go. Let's have a look. Wow, absolutely stunning area, incredible. And is you were saying that possibly up near Port Edward side? Is that?
Yeah, it starts from Port Edward from southward for 22 kilometers. There's this stretch of coastline, which I enjoyed this wonderful horse trail there. Only to discover a couple of years later that there were plans to mine those dunes for titanium. And I thought this was like plundering paradise. I said, you can't do that. But at the same time, I'm a social worker, so it's very important that it's not about my agenda imposing it. It's about saying, well, and Bishop Jeff Davies, who was the Anglican Archbishop of the area, we used to call him the Green Bishop, because he's still called the Green Bishop, because he had a deep passion for the conservation, protection, and the stewardship of the environment. We then found ourselves meeting the King and Queen of the Yamampondo, and my book, The Promise of Justice, tells a lot of that backstory, so we don't need to dwell on it now. But I was very uncomfortable about proceeding with anything coming from as an outsider to tell these people how they should live. But then circumstances conspired for me to actually meet Sinagugu one day at the Queen's Palace, at the Great Place, as they call it, hardly a palace. And there was some serendipitous connection there. And I just remember, and I can maybe just say this thing, why I call them Nkomba, because you saw in that beautiful visual that there is these palm trees growing, and you saw them embracing those palms. Now, those palm trees only grow on the northern banks of the Imzikaba and the Mtentu River, and nowhere else in the world.
No ways.
And
so they're indigenous palms.
Indigenous palms. They're called Dubius Cafra, or the Nkomba palm.
Okay.
And then, Sinagugu, I said, I had this idea. I said, Nkomba, these are a species which are an indicator species for global warming, because if things change, and the reason they only grow there is because of the microclimatic condition. And then it occurred to me that, hey, Nkomba, I'm going to call you Nkomba. And then he tells me, you know what Nkomba means? The one who points direction. The indicator. So I thought, well, okay, I'm now going. And then he was responsible for helping me to get a sense of connection that we as human beings don't live on the earth. We live in the earth, in its ecosystems. We are from the earth. We've evolved from there, and we will return there. But the mindset we have is almost like thinking we're in a state of ecological exile. We live somewhere else, and we're just visiting this planet, and we'll trash this and go on to the next one. No, we've got to find ourselves in, becoming indigenous, as he is, and that's why he's from that area. He grew up there. But let's call him.
Get him on Sine. Let's. We're going back to just getting Sine on the screen. Let's see. He's coming in all the way from Port Edward. Sine, lovely to see you.
Greetings to everyone in the studio and those watching live. Good evening, and nice to connect with you all. I think the story that John is not telling you is that when he came to the Wild Coast, the first thing they had to do with his family was to learn how to ride horses. And they went towards Lanseria in Joburg, where they learned horse riding. And the horse owners, they taught them that you must bond with your horses. So they had to bring carrots every day to bond with the horses. And then, so when they came down to the Wild Coast, they had stashed their bags with loads and loads of carrots in order to connect with the Mpondo ponies. And they got here. And then the first thing they did when they met the horses at Mzama River mouth was to offer them carrots. And then the Mpondo ponies, they never seen the carrots, and they don't know what the carrots. So they didn't take the carrot sticks.
Like that.
So they looked at the carrots and then went on grazing. So which was a hard pill to swallow for the people who have been taught horses love carrots.
Of course. So I had to revise my assumptions.
And we often use this particular story with John's experience and saying is so critical and important that when the outsiders, they come to any place of local communities, that you come there with 2 ears to listen, learn, and hear what the local people have to say, instead of coming stuck in your outcome in mind, or with your assumptions and all of that. So, and how useful it is for us all, before we can start preaching what we know, to first listen, learn, and hear those whom we coming to their territories. And that's something that we take very seriously in Bondoland in many ways, but today is not the day for that. But yes, coming to John, yes, I came to know John back in 2006 when we met at Kaugeni, the Royal Palace, and with the connection, of course, the following year, which was that same year, actually, not the following year, I decided to invite him to assist us with all the challenges that we were facing in Bondoland, in particular the extractive ideas and projects that were being planned by our government, which we were opposed to. And then from then onwards, it has been a long journey of many years, which has given birth to many outcomes and impacts. One of those being the book that John mentioned earlier, which is The Promise of Justice, that he wrote to document that particular journey, to tell the story of our past, of our present, of our future, in terms of, and also the stories of the land, as we say in Bondoland, that the land knows us. We are born of the land, and we don't own the land, but the land owns us because we are born of the land, and the land knows the stories of our forefathers that we never saw, but the land knows them, and the land provides for us. So since when we are born, our umbilical cords, when they drop off, they get buried onto the land, connecting us to the land, because the land becomes the mother in terms of providing us with food, with medicine when we are sick, and with the herbs and plants and sacred places for rituals. But also when we ultimately pass on, the land swallows us back. So the land knows us. And as a result, John, amongst other stories he tells in the book, is how you cannot put a price tag on the land, because the money, as Samson Carke told him, that the money will vanish, but the land will remain. So you cannot equate the land to any price. So to commodify land and to sell it is a sin that is beyond any of our imagination. The land is there. We are the stewards, and we need to protect the land. And hence we continue to fight fiercely for our land. Thank you.
He sounds like a teacher.
He does. He is a teacher.
Have you got any jobs that side?
But what I want you to just quickly say, because where Molly comes into the story, is that I was invited to go and give an input to the Wilderness Leadership Training course in 2009. And by then we were becoming known. We had successfully got them to revoke the mining rights originally, and it was a big new story. And a friend of mine, Dr. Ian McCullum, invited me, and I said, look, I'm not coming alone. I don't want to come and talk. And Sinagugu came with us, and at that event we met Simon Blackburn, and Simon and I bonded from that point onwards. And he said to me, John, you live in Joburg, you have traveled back and forth the Wild Coast. We've got this, this coming to our home in Bergville, which we've got a spot called the Tree Hill Lodge at the where the Battle of Spionkop was. Wow. So I thought, well, that's very nice. And I turned up there. And that was like 2009, 2010. So since then, Simon has been part of our support system. Sinagugu's been there. Okay. And what I've, insofar as been able to achieve anything, it's because there has been a support system below the surface. People often say, "Oh, John, you work miracles. You can walk on water." I say, don't be misled. There are just stepping stones just below the surface, which I know where they are.
Yeah.
And that's really, in a sense, how Simon got involved. But Sinagogo might want to comment about, his relationship there with the Blackburns as well, because I know they would love to have seen him, doing history tours there too.
Yes, yeah. No, yes, I've been traveling with John. Of course, we have traveled with John, the breadth country, and I've been to the Blackburn Simon's place, and their hospitality in our numerous journeys between the Wild Coast and Johannesburg. A very warm, really warm, and an amazing family in terms of embracing strangers in us, whom they met by accident, but also I think what's also very important about their location with the Spincorp and all of that is the history. Is the history of the people, history of the land, and the history of where we have come from in this particular country, in that part being part of the battlefields, which tells. And I do think it is important for us. Everything has got history. Whether you're looking at the geology, whether you're looking at the evolution of flora, of fauna, of plants, of animals. So, and looking at the human evolution, you're looking at the history of the planet, of the universe, but everything has got history, and it is important for all of us to understand the history that has brought us to where we are. The same applies to the history of our population, because knowing the history helps us navigate the future better, and it also helps us in a way to plan and to try and avoid the mistakes of the past. That's why these stories, like the one that John is working on, those stories, they need to be told. And all history, whether it's the good and the bad, deserves to be told. Otherwise, a failure to tell those stories, not knowing where we have come from, so we might end up stumbling back into those mistakes of the past. But telling those mistakes of the past helps us to be able to navigate the future better and make sure that we strive to be better people. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. The history helps us to try and not make the same bloody mistakes over and over again.
Well, without history, I don't have a job as a history teacher.
Yeah. Well, and I tell you what, I realize now I've got to, if I ever come past the area, which I do every now and again, I've got to come and have a chat, because I love the history. And obviously, does Sina then do tours and things as well? Is that your thing, Sina?
Oh yes, I am a tourist guide, and those who come on my hikes, I do the Wild Coast hikes between Port Edward and Port St. John's. So I do lots of storytelling, and in particular focusing on the shipwrecks, on the history of Amampondo, going back 200 years ago in terms of what happened around 1800. In 1700s. So we visit that because historical facts are fascinating. That's one thing I get fascinated, and I try to share what I know, and also in order, to entertain and to keep my clients really help them to appreciate the past. And also to see what is really the invisible history that has shaped the present. As a Mampondo, like any other nations, we do have interesting historical facts, and our encounters with the castaways of those shipwrecks that date back to as early as 1500. So there are fascinating historical facts looking back into human stupidity. All of those things, they fascinate us looking back. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly ask you something? I mean, it sounds like it was all wonderful, happy thing, but there were some really moments of real crisis. And I found myself really out of my comfort zone. We thought we had defeated this mining operation, and then soon after, they told to withdraw the licenses. I get a call from Sinagugu, and he says, John, you need to get to Kolobeni Junior Secondary School, because there is a story to be heard about how several of the children had been shambocked by the police, because the children were now proving to be an obstacle to the plans of the school. And it's quite a complex story, and I've told it in a chapter which I put up on my Medium channel, which is called Shambocked. But Sinagogu, maybe you want to just quickly summarize that turning point. And the reason I want you to tell it is because I was scrounging around for some sort of precedent-setting things that I could actually try and get some bearings on how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And in due course, I discovered them in Molly Backburn's own life story.
Okay.
So we quickly give us a comment on that one, and then I think we need to move on.
What happened was that when with the ministers coming down to Kolobeni to hand over or to announce the granting of the mining license, so there were those that they knew that their families were opposed to this, so they refused to sing for the minister, which was a huge embarrassment, of course, for the school principal, and hence the kids therefore had to be punished, shambocked, because they refused, because the principal felt
Because they wouldn't
he
sing.
was he was embarrassed. But with John's intervention, or should I say investigation, though he's not a social worker's investigation, it unraveled and began to expose some of these, because which is something very amazing to see how decisions up at national level end up having this negative impact, but also reaction even from the young kids. And some of them, they were really very, very young. And then having the corporal punishment, which had been banned in the country, being used, because these kids, they refuse to sing, and refusing for a very good reason, as a way to protest, which was a peaceful protest, actually, when you look at it, because they were not interested to sing for the minister who's coming to force down a mining permit down the throats of their parents who were saying no to mining on their land. So, which was the best thing for them to do, and they were not supposed to be punished, but of course it ended up being like that. And we are sure the minister was not even aware how her journey to Kolobeni has actually led to these young kids and ending up being administered corporal punishment. So let me stop there.
And all I want to say there is we got an investigation from IPID. We now have a Bill of Rights. They did come and investigate. They did, it was an intervention, because we could celebrate our constitution. The story goes on from there to quite some great complexity, where things became quite violent. But let's move on from that, because I think that this is where history becomes so fortifying. Yeah. Because when we experience these sorts of adversities, if you've got a story of hope, it gives you the necessary kind of resilience to actually kind of say, well, it's happened before, and they were able to overcome it. Yes. Therefore, whatever we're facing today, we can overcome it as well.
Yeah. Okay. And so, I mean, Sina, so your relationship has grown up obviously with the book, and you're talking about the way that Molly's Blackburn story sort of comes into it as well, in terms of just how you respond to these things.
It is. And the extraordinary thing is now our next guest who's sitting here waiting is Mike Lowe.
Yes.
Now, he came to the Wild Coast as well. He and Sinagugu were saying, good to meet you again. He's been on hikes there, walks there. We've had friends on that thing. And then, so maybe you should play the next clip.
Okay.
Okay, and which then sets us the table for Mike Lowe to explain.
Are we saying goodbye to Sina then for now?
Yeah.
Okay, Sina, so we're going to put you backstage and we're going to introduce Mike.
Okay.
She never knew me,
Thank you.
but I felt I knew her just the same. I used to call her Narcissus when the world woman. She was a breaker of chains. They tell me her father was a rich man, a lawyer by trade. He taught her how to be a lady, but at the same time to call a spade a spade.
Well, the family was asked by a very famous movie producer in America if they could do a movie about Molly Backburn's life.
During COVID, when I sort of put all of this stuff together,
Oh, right.
and I did sort of, here we go.
Okay.
So Jane Fonda and Marlon Brando we're going to do. Sydney Poitier will take the role of Nelson Mandela. In the television miniseries scheduled to broadcast at the end of next year, Marlon Brando is getting a part, possibly as P.W. Boyd.
Oh, that would have been priceless.
Still more stuff. This was just the stuff I thought that guests would be interested in.
Right.
And actually the family, because the family
I
don't.
didn't see
So
that.
what I did was I put everything in chronological order. I thought that
Right.
was the most logical way of trying to, like from her first newspaper article or letter, sort of to the last. And that's how I did these scrapbooks. And then sort of from this, I did a very ridiculously rough draft of what I thought could be a book, but sort of put it into chapters of the characters that were part of her life. But actually, you can't read it. It's rubbish. It doesn't follow on. And I thought if I had like another life and I would have the time to be able to write it, that actually the story could be a love story.
As you go through, just look out for one by Mike Lowe. I forget which one it was. Because when I was here, I was like, gosh, Mike Lowe. And like, it was in the 80s, and he's a good friend. I said, you remember this? Yeah, he goes,
This is just another summertime, still life in spring. The schoolboys sketch about a candle in the dark. To most people, it won't mean a thing. This is just another summertime, still life in spring. But to me it means more than any still life of yours. And love songs lovers would never sing.
the first rough draft of history will never be finished. And people are saying, John, is this book ever going to be finished too? Because it's like such a dynamic thing. But that's why, in a sense, there have been people who have come out of all sorts of places to actually support me and encourage me. And this coincidence with Mike Lowe.
Yes.
And I'm wanting to, invite Mike to actually.
All right, let's bring him on. Mike, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. How lovely to see you all.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so Mike, just share a little bit about your connection with Sinagugu and then how that then bridged into me talking with you and how I just found you an extraordinary resource of exactly what Sinagugu was talking about, learning from history. And tell us a bit about your own early journalism career and how Molly influenced that.
Well, I did meet Sinagugu on Fred Cockett's swim. Thank God we didn't swim, but we walked. And we walked through the community of the Amapondo, Kolobeni. We did it all. It was, I just want to say one thing before I even get to Sinagugu, but the truth about that place, if you look at it in the dawn, have a cup of coffee, what you're actually looking at is this beautifully settled place where there's farming, everyone has their little thing going, it's kind of feudal, and it's also postmodern in the sense that it leads the way in what we want and what we don't want. So their battle against the Australian fascist, who, with all these dreadful colonial ideas and all the backing from the government and the oil fossil fuels, as I call them, that's why we don't want it. We have beautiful, beautiful communities, and we have different ways of big corporates have got to find different ways of interacting with communities, which are not so harmful. I mean, the mining that they planned there was going to just be a death knell. Anyway, so we did discover that Shell we're already about to start their seismic blasting on the Wild Coast, and I was with the Daily Dispatch as a semi-retired contracted environmental and local climate reporter, which I invented for fun. And the story broke, and we banged it. It was fantastic. It was Shell's coming, and they're going to blast the Wild Coast, and we kind of knew it was going to get a reaction, but we did it. And then I phoned Sinagugu and said, Sinagugu, bro, things are happening here. There's already going to be a protest down the Hoon Reef, and I tell you, from that moment on, our little, small little sort of voices in East London, Buffalo City, it just went boom with the Ahmadiyya Crisis Committee. They were incredible. So, that's how that thing really took off, and he's rightfully rewarded for the work they did, and it became a national, international story. And I'm horrified to see that Shell has been granted a license to mine off the West Coast. It's appalling, actually. And it just shows that we are so out of line with our promises on our national contributions and so on, and we're just pushing this dreadful agenda. Molly Backburn and I was really just a little freelancer. I did not last long in the Evening Post, where I got my first job at 1984. I came out of the student movement. I was at Rhodes doing journalism for 2 years, and I finished off at UCT, where I co-edited Varsity magazine. And I needed a job. My editorship ended. I was a terrible student. I came home, basically. And I decided PE, and I worked at it, and I was just dragged into the townships by Kuster, and Molly Backburn was around, and the Black Sash had their office down on the main street down there with Makusa. And, well, having been booted out of the Evening Post, I was frozen out, and my colleague, Joanne Becker, she was fired. We had tried to assist the UDF in writing documents as to how they could get their statements published, because a lot of it was pretty militant, and we knew that the papers at that stage, although some of them were quite sympathetic, although not in my case, the Evening Post, but the Herald was a different story, they just weren't getting their voice. And we knew that big things were happening. There was a revolt brewing. And Molly was right in the thick of it. Her and Judy, her sister, they were brave. And I just want to say that, I was then freelancing and grubbing for bucks, and we started trying to work with the alternative press. And Molly was always just this voice that crossed over. She had the clipped tones of the sort of the English South African, very English, but also very South African. She was beautifully dressed. She always looked gorgeous and sort of well presented. But she was radical, man. She was in those townships. She was talking to those UDF people. She was accepted, and they knew, and she knew exactly what her role was, and she played it well. I just want to tell a quick story that as the struggle progressed and the tension rose, and we had our first real rebellion in South Africa, which started in the PE townships, after decades of horrible suppression, following the 1960s trial and the ANC's declaration of armed struggle and so on and so on. The first real revolt, it started and it went big in PE, and she was on the cusp of it. And with Matthew Gonibe from then Craddock and Lingalichle, they were like mates. And then Molly would go there and she would break those permit rules and get into those townships. And then she would be hauled out and taken to the cop shop, and she'd sit there. And I was chatting to Dominic Souchon, a friend of mine, and Dominic and Janet Cherry were two very prominent white UDF activists. Janet was underground, and Dominic may as well have been. But anyway, and she would sit in those offices waiting, just being held up, and she would knit. And I said to Dom, she had very big knitting needles because nobody was going to mess with Molly. And I loved that about her.
Yeah.
So she was a struggler, and she was a hard taskmaster. We worked with her. And she had tough words for journalists whom she felt at some point. She told me, look, you journalists, you're just going to come and leave here and leave. And, after I did get detained and whatever, banned and so on, I did spend a year in PE and then left. And then I came back to Eastern Cape, Molly, by the way, that's a message I always wanted to deliver. And I spent most of my working life, in the PE since about 1990, in the Eastern Cape, from about 1995 So we did come back, and I do always feel grateful that she looked after me. She sheltered me once when the security police came looking for me for a call up, and she was pretty much an amazing woman. I was in their home. I would be there when they would come back as black sashes. She was deep in the black sash, and Sheena Duncan was with her, and they'd come back from Newton and they'd found a man shackled to the table, and they'd stopped it. And when they got back into that house in the beachfront in P, where she was married to Gavin, and that's the love story. They totally loved each other. They were so thrilled that they'd made this intervention. They were proud, and so that's just someone who stood out from a community. And Gino, I'm so glad you're doing this, by the way, because there's lots of other linkages here that I love. You and your center stage, which I despised until I went to see you, and then I don't despise you. Anton, the love of the alternative music, and James used to say, throw rotten tomatoes for people who make covers, and that you were part of it, Gino. Then I went to see you, and I loved you. I mean, even John Clarke to Abba. It's lovely that you're having this crossover right now, because
Anton hated it as well. He also did. Anton hated the cover as well, but I've always done it with him, you see.
But they are together. It's beautiful. I love it. I just want to say, P was scared. It was very, very violent. It was a tight, silent place, but the times were just marvelous.
Yeah, it's true. But incredible that you're talking about them doing interventions, like literally getting out there into the township doing stuff. In those days, people can't imagine that, and they're forgetting. This is the whole thing about the history. People forget about the history, and they make that same mistake over again. It's like it's so important to tell these stories and in a real way. That people can relate to it as well, and think, hell, if this had to happen again, it would be terrible.
And it does happen. We've now got protections, you see, and this is what was so important. And we've got a free press. That's why we have to say, people say, well, who were in this whole Wild Coast story, from the Kolobeni mining to the shelf, seismic exploration? We have media, we have freedom of expression, and we have now the internet. Now, Molly never had the internet. And she was a member of the provincial council, so she used that as a sort of a means towards actually giving her a certain presence and status. She was an elected official. She could claim a sort of a mandate. And I just love the fact that she interpreted that mandate saying, in the best interest of my constituents, we need to ensure that race relations are that we need to kind of reach out. And there's that lovely story about that you include in your song, reaching out. And I want to just ask Anton a little about how you kind of, what you've heard so far. I mean, you saw in that clip there about, them making a film of her. Just give me a little bit about your own thing, and for you and Mike to just interact as people that are trying to, make meaning out of this situation that we're in.
The line you're referring to is a lot of what I was told when I spoke to people like Janet Terry and Judy Thomas back in 1991. The words that Molly Backburn had used as a motivational speaker, because when she was speaking, it was also a motivation of raising awareness and not just trying to work people up or inform them about what was going on. It was her words were, if you hold out your hand, somebody will take it. And that is what I believe you've also found with, you've reached out, and then with the research, and you've found people reach back, which is unexpected. And that was what she had certain sayings, like if you hold out your hand, somebody will take it. It was important for me in the song to actually use her words in the song as much as possible. So as much as you're being a biographer now, and trying to keep things close to the source, I had that discipline back then to try and put her words into the song. Mark has much more interesting stories of you were telling me earlier about a situation where she picked him up in a car, and Mr. Busak was in the car, and he was about to be whisked away in the back of a police van, so they kind of saved him from kind of being dragged off to cells, and that was just incidental. It was just another sort of coincidence that happened, that the car that he was rescued by happened to contain these people from
These luminaries.
different very different sides of.
I think the truth of that story
from
was an
intervening.
older nobody in a little car with Mono Badella driving, and all the UDF guys. There was Edward Ngoyi and someone else pretty famous, and it started burning in Langa. It was 1985 or 1984, in that big year when there were more than 28 people were massacred. And
That's Langa and Utene.
Langa Utene, yeah, 95.
They
It's Langa and
rushed out there,
Utene.
they took the whole world press. There were 13 cars, and we were way at the back, and one was nobody. All the agencies were there, and Molly and Busak were in the front car, and Mono, who was like a pleading light in my life, he just dragged me by the scruff and said, "You come to the world report in the township, young white boy," you know. He just takes the right hand side, he bypasses this whole column, and we go, and suddenly I'm parked at the barrier with this blonde-haired riot cop in powder blue screaming and his gat waving around, and next to Molly and Alan. And then the cop looks at me and says, "Hey, you!" And he comes at me, and I just know, well, I'm not going to take him. I jump out the back, and we have a running, and we run, and I jump into the car with Molly and Alan Busak, and there I was, and nobody. I had the best interview. Wow, life was good. The cop came up and said, "You want that guy?" And Busak just rolled the window. So thanks God.
Can I just also insert here, as we've gone about this sort of fundraising, thunder funding process, it's been so interesting because as people have pledged, I've seen all sorts of interesting people turn up. Besides Tally, we'll come to you now, Tally, but somebody who I've got to know quite well over the years is David O'Sullivan. He was a radio journalist as well, and he was, and he's just written with Russie's book, Russie, with David O'Sullivan, and in the book, Russie tells how, for him, growing up in Dispatch, which is right next to KwaNobuhle, growing up in blissful ignorance of what was really going on. Anyway, there's another interesting story. So I have to give, I'm sure David's watching, so I've got to give a plug to Russie as well. And it just shows how the story at Molly and so the theatre within which she actually exercised her responsibility as a citizen who had certain values and principles that she felt were not to be violated and not to be compromised. And that's why I just loved that verse that you used too.
There are lots of verses in that song.
The verse about standing up. And I'm sure we're going to put that in later.
Standing up alone. People, when you talk about liberation struggle people, and I'm not saying Molly Backburn was that, she was not a struggle ideologist at all. But when you take a point in that time as a white person, your family would immediately have very little support for you ideologically, and in some cases, the Bram Fisher story is very evident of how extreme that was. How he was cast out from his whole society, his whole family. But there was a shade of that if you were liberal, or if you were critical of the government, or if you picked an argument with your with the flow of your family. And for black people, it wasn't like that. You would not risk becoming an outcast if you were critical, or if you got active about your political affiliation. And so for a white person to be involved in, let's call it the liberation struggle, formally or informally or critically or even in your heart, you risked ostracism that you never experienced as a person of color. You had to be immensely brave against real Nazis out there who turned on you as hard as they would have turned on other so-called, how can we say, people who were fighting for liberation. They would turn as hard on you if you were white, if you did that. But not only that, at home, you would not receive the type of emotional, or psychological, or social support that people of color did have.
Yeah, well, what I found also helpful with Molly, and Mike, and you can identify with this too, you know, being a white conscript in the 80s. If you try and say, no, I really have a conscientious objection to actually serving in the whites and the SADF, well, that, you know, people were anxious for you, or family were anxious for you, and they said, well, what do? You leave the country, you go out there. But Molly and the Black Sash have to be acknowledged for having played an incredibly important role in ensuring that there was a legislative shift that enabled spaces to be open for people to actually be true to their conscience without having to suffer, you know, the sort of the indignities of what others had to do. But in social work, we have the saying, there's no such thing as problems. There are only people with problems. And I want us to listen to this next clip, which is Molly explaining to Julie Frederiksen, who was a journalist that interviewed her in 1985, who was from Zimbabwe, who I then discovered in talking to Mike. He also knew her. And it's funny, the interesting thing about this book, this is an aside, is that I've interviewed people and they've all kind of got to, I know this person. And so you actually find that there's connections being made between people that have been...
In her Rari, she protected me when I was on the run from a call-up. She was amazing.
Wow.
Well, there we go. So you see how all these rekindling of things. Yeah. Anyways, are we ready for that next segment then? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
When I'm asked of if there was one single factor which actually pitchforked me right into the whole arena of black politics, I know it was meeting Siphiwe Mthimkhulu, who was a young COSAS leader here in May 1981. He was detained for 5 months, and on his release, I was asked by a priest to go and see him in hospital. He was in a shocking state. Although he had walked out of detention, he had, after a period of about 3 days, found he was unable to walk, had terrible stomach cramps, and he was really in a bad way. And he had no evidence of physical injury at all. After a few days, it was decided that he was deteriorating so rapidly that he should get on to Cape Town, where he was put under the supervision of Professor Frances Ames. She very quickly realized that there was something most unusual about this young man, and she sent over hair specimens. By this time, his hair was falling out as well. And he was almost non-compass. He didn't know people around him. Even his own mother, who was flown down, he wasn't quite sure who she was for a while. They sent over specimens of nail and skin and various other things to London, and were quite astonished when the diagnosis came back that he was suffering from thallium poisoning. You know, he really had an amazing following amongst the young people, not only because he had tremendous charisma, but because he was very disciplined in his attitude towards problems. He was very thoughtful towards his parents. He was mature far beyond his years. Once he settled down at home, we got him a wheelchair and he was able to be a little bit mobile, and he very rarely went without somebody at his side. I was leaving for East London early the next day and went off, and it was very upset 2 days later to get a call from his mother to tell me that he wasn't home. And I said, well, since when wasn't he home? She said, well, since that Thursday when he went to hospital, he never came home. To this day, he's never been seen again. He disappeared absolutely without a trace. Now, that experience outraged many people. And whenever I get tired or think, oh, I can't be bothered, or I can't go on, or what's the use of it, I always think of him. And I think I'm very fired. Sorry. I just get a hanky.
It appeared
that security police were going to get away with it. I guess they did. But I think the story was kept alive by Molly and others, which probably saved a lot of more lives. Because if it had not been followed up, I think a lot of other people would have been poisoned with that, because they would have said, okay, here's a safe way, as opposed to bludgeoning them to death. So I think that intervention is greater than what people conceive, because actually what would have happened, they would have utilized it more extensively without it being followed.
John will give it.
All right. But that, you know, I love the fact that it's also the Eastern Cape is such a strong area. And it often doesn't get the attention that the
strong in what way?
It's just like these are normal. We've got this, like, there's no sort of fame and fortune here. It's just people with their heads down and working hard and getting things done. You know. Yeah. It's like in the same way as I get the feeling that with Molly Backburn, it was she was just a normal. She wasn't anything. She didn't see herself as anything special. She just made a stand, you know. And when you did that at that stage, like you're saying, you were either one side or you were liberal and communist, you know. That was there was no in between.
John's going to get to what he calls a I called it a tipping point, but he calls it an inflection, and he's going to talk about what that was for what as Molly Backburn's biographer, he's going to talk about what that was for her.
Yeah,
it is a if you had to reflect on at what point. Yeah. You decided, okay, being a musician and a drummer was like a good thing to continue with.
Yes.
You know, you'd have to think, okay, where was that? And you'd probably just have to scratch and say it was that show, probably with me. You know?
Yeah. You know, and Mike was in the thick of it, being writing for newspapers and things. You know,
he's going to talk about where it was for him.
Yeah.
In his journey as a biographer. Because his journey is as invested in his work, and the work he does as an intervener in witnesses to truth, people who have found themselves speaking truth to power, like people know people like Julian Assange. They all know that people who are doing what Molly Backburn was doing at great risk to themselves. John is directly involved with such people as a counselor. And that has brought him to people like Sinaguku in Ponderland with the mining travesty, and then it has brought him to the being the biographer of a person whose life and trials and challenges are and the weird absurd synchronicities that go with that in this country to be a case study of great importance in the work he's doing. As a musician, as a teacher, it is important to have the stories of humanists. We have enough of revolutionaries and politicians and intellectuals, but humanists.
It's a real nature of this thing. This very house that we're in now, I think my father-in-law, John Molyneux, who spent his life in the township, just doing whatever he needed to do. He had an old age home and a creche that he went every single day. He retired after being a quantity surveyor, and he got flack for that because he was going into the township, you know, and helping people that needed help. And I think that was Molly's thing. It was just there was a need for people to be helped, and she was going to do it.
Yeah, well, my point about, you know, you follow your heart. When you start trying to rationalize and intellectualize it, you'll find all sorts of reasons why not to do it. But what really for me was so powerful is just how she, as things emerged, I could see that and that whole point about that thallium poisoning thing, she just did it because it was the right thing to do.
The right thing to do,
Lucky Mr. is now reflecting on it, and he says it was also a very important strategic intervention.
Wow.
because it now basically deprived the security police. It spiked one of their guns. So then I couldn't use thallium poisoning, which was not traceable and all the rest, as she explained, as one of their methods of getting, of taking people out. And so
they find other ways of killing people rather than thallium. And Molly, Blackburn, did she plan that? Did she know that was going to happen?
She didn't. She did it because she knew it was the right thing to do, and that's partly what.
We only found that after the Truth Commission had done its inquiries many years ago.
She had obviously herself. She was killed, and I never knew when it happened. But I used that, and the reason why I find this story so helpful is that when people come to me who are being retaliated against for speaking truth to power and suffering as a consequence, but they conventionally call whistleblowers, we prefer the term witness bearers because they are bearing witness to a truth, and it's a more inclusive term. It's not saying, well, you just this particular identity. It's about somebody whose convictions have now gelled to the point where they say, I'm not going to put up with this. This is wrong, and I'm going to take a stand. And the first thing I say to them, I said, if you're speaking truth to power, if you don't get into trouble, either it wasn't the truth or it wasn't power. So, and that my job as a social worker and providing psychosocial support to them is to give them that sense of saying, I also have to tell you, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And you saw that same trajectory happen, but it did get better.
Immensely,
It was a lot of tragedy and all the rest. So the whole thing says you need to be true to yourself. You need to know your story. And if you own your story fully, if you are taking it internally and you're owning it, and this is why insight from Brené Brown, who's a social worker like me, she says, nobody can take your story away from it if you've owned it for yourself. If you haven't, well, then your adversaries will find ways of actually unnerving you and shaming you and kind of disorientating you because and they will try to smear you and character assassinations, as Molly experienced, the graffiti on the wall. But if you know what the truth is, I just say to them, look, you can try and refute all that nonsense, or you can just simply be true to yourself, and that's really to provide a safe space and role model. Because
John, if I came to you unhinged because I was sitting on something like some of the people you've dealt with, or some of the nuclear truths that Mike and Molly Backburn knew, and you said to me it's going to get worse before it gets better, I might want to, damn it, take myself out. What are you offering in terms of dealing with the fact that the powers that are destabilizing you are far more powerful in the world, in your head, than you are?
Well,
how do you empower these people that are that? And if you told me that it's going to get worse, I might.
Initially, of course, people come to a social worker. They want
to back you up there, Anton.
Yes.
I just want to back Anton up with something there.
I know he's got an answer.
The one thing that history can be abused horribly, and it can also liberate us. And we're trying to find our way in the future. It's a very dark, scary place at the moment. There's lots of stuff happening. So the one thing that happened back in those days was that you stepped out of line from the apartheid regime, the National Party, and white culture, the whole lot, and you got hammered. You got taken apart systematically. But what I mean by that is security is trained in the NPE to take down people, and it was anyone. White people suffered just as much abuse and takedown and character assassination. Probably not as violent as was happening in the townships, but for Molly to stand up in the way that she did, for every white person who were a minority, and we were a smaller minority than minority, if you ever stood up against the regime or opposed racism, all the ugly things that were happening, you got systematically taken down, and that's where it starts with the individual. You're very right, Anton, saying how hard it was for all of us to break free or to see what was really happening. There were a lot of ideological controls, lots of propaganda, lots of culture that bound people in a tight, racist little core. It took a hell of a lot to break free. It was very distressing. It was painful. And congratulations to all of those who did it. You're all champions. But you've got to start with those individuals in the current context, and that's where John, I think, is very useful in taking the Molly story and saying, what are the values that we still want to stand for? And that starts with individuals, and then it starts to collaborate, just like we're doing on the show, by the way, start crossing over with ideas and trying to find the way forward.
Now that he's softballed my question, can you give me the answer you gave me when I asked you this over the bottle of wine? What the hell are you going to do to help me that I'm on a hit list or something?
Yeah, well,
which is the reality. The world didn't change. And it was never going to. You were always going to get people that walked in the shoes of Molly Backburn, and you always will, and they won't. Walk or they will. But now, what are you going to do to help me if I come to you and say to you, I'm on a hit list for telling the truth? What must I do? Tell the truth or jump off a cliff or what?
Well, see, it's about reframing the term. Are you looking for a solution, or are you looking for a resolution? Now, I know this sounds like a wordplay, but the idea of a resolution is about something which comes from the heart. A solution is like a cognitive process of working out an equation. A resolution says, well, what is, my first thing I say, to be true to yourself, to be true to your inner conscience and your voice. I'm not a judge, so I'm not going to sit and judge of you. It's a safe space. And what I can do is introduce you to other people who've gone through the same thing. And then you start seeing the solidarity start developing.
Okay.
And that then is which actually reinforces. And the more they put pressure on it, the more that you turn to mutual solidarity.
I mean, like
support.
Mark in the back of Molly's car or in a lounge, hiding away his camera footage, or trying to, not get smacked up by the police. That type of physical safe space, but perhaps a safe space to actually express and meet and understand that you are not alone.
You're not alone. Yeah. And what was so remarkable, which is really for me being, she used her relative privilege, in a way that she said, well, I've got a relative privilege, but I've got values, things that matter, people matter. I'm wanting to make sure that I have that if there's a person in need, and that's what that lyric he said. She always take a phone call, and it's interesting in that Julie Frederickson interview in the audio, you see the phone ringing, and I clipped it out. But there was one thing where the phone. She said, "Why don't you just take a message?" And she says, "Oh, it's so and so. He's going to be at the airport." And I said, who was this guy that she mentioned? It was some leading international human rights sort of figure. So she's like having this interview for the journalist, and she's taking this. So she was just so available to people who were in need, and who just needed the affirmation. And in the process of interviewing so many people in this thing, it's just been so reassuring. Like it's been knocking on an open door, every one of them. I have to tell one of them, and I hope he won't mind. When Wim Trengro was after the Langa massacre, or the Langa Uitenhage massacre, he was representing some of the families, and they all came down, to the Canterbury Commission to be able to, do their work. But there was no room at the inn. The Holiday Inn was full up with all the judges and everything. So he said, "Oh, come to my place. You can stay in one of our kids' rooms." And he confesses, he said, "I had a little bit of a sort of a cynical view of the Black Sass, to be honest. And I thought of them as being like, well-meaning, but really just not actually being, kind of strategic and effective in what they were doing." He says, "But I got there and I saw Molly, and I completely changed my mind." That's relationship, the power relation, and the transparency and the openness of that. And then what happened with Wim, as we talk some more, he just went on to say that, there were other people that he put me in touch with that were able to help me further flesh out what, with the benefit of hindsight. There's a lovely saying I use by Soren Kierkegaard. He says, we can only understand our life backwards, but we've got to live our lives forward. And Molly was somebody who just lived her lives forward with confidence and faith and conviction that this is the right thing to do. And with the benefit of hindsight, we now see how important it was For example, now there's a big incident, and I deal with it at length. It's the core of the book is what happened in 1985 when she went into that police station and she confronted the police officers about this missing children that were not there.
Euthanasia.
Euthanasia. Where did I say?
That is, it was euthanasia.
It was euthanasia station.
Yeah, I've been there many times
as
a complainant, not as a...
Okay.
But in that police station,
that police station,
old colonial gambling, huge
I've got
place.
original audio, material which has found its way to me, in which she leaves a Black Sash off a conference. It's happening on the 17th of March, 1985, because you got this call from this parent who's really concerned that they're stealing our children. So I've got all that. When when the book's published, there'll be QR codes in the pages that will give people direct access to the audio, like you've heard these tapes too. But I just want to make this point, that the person that she called out for smelling of liquor, who got very angry with her, was Lieutenant John William Forshire, who was the commander of the Right Police. 4 days later, he was the guy that gave the order to fire.
At
Langa, at the massacre, killing 19, 20 people. And then the Canamere Commission.
Injuring a large...
Yes. Then the Canamere Commission and Lieutenant John William Forshire had to then testify. He was found to be an unreliable witness and all the rest. Very interesting story. He then sued Molly for defamation, for criminal defamation. And that's when I was going through those, Cheryl's scrapbook. I said, oh my gosh, there she is, sued for defamation. And I just love the thing, if they did make a film, that she was in the morning appearing in court to actually testify against two police officers that had been beating a person that she had stumbled in on their crime. And in the afternoon, she was a defendant in a defamation suit from the police. So you have this weird thing. He just kept her confident, and her advocate at the time was Chris Nicholson. He's now sort of a retired judge. And he said she was the best witness to possibly have, because you could just rely that she would just speak the truth and there would be no question about whether this was true or not. And he didn't have to worry about whatever she might give away in cross-examination. She just spoke the truth. So that's why, again, it's one of those things. I mean, I've been in several courtrooms and you just see people lying all the time. Then, what Chris Wim Trengove did, he said, Rian Malan wrote about that Lieutenant Forshire.
My Traitor's Heart.
In My Traitor's Heart, the author, Rian Malan. So I get hold of Rian Malan, I interview him, and he tells me about his experience of a year later, reflect on this police officer, having to do it. So I've got all those sorts of incredible, they say truth is stranger than fiction. I just found these things connecting. And it's just been awesomely, kind of encouraging for me, because I'm like in a situation where I'm trying to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself. I'm involved in situations. And yet it is.
And it was going to, and people like Molly Backburn and your clients know that. They have to find a way forward anyway.
And the important thing is, in terms of what do we do to inspire people, I have to tell them it's going to get worse. I said, well, there are people in history for whom it did get worse, yet we have now come through. We've come through the fire. I've just had a client right now who, in the Forte corruption saga, she was then, mercilessly, kind of wrongfully arrested, put into prison, 17 months taken out of her life. And I've just been able to say, Sarah, it's going to get better, but it's just getting worse. And just to have that solidarity, so where did I come from? Well, I've been able to say, well, I've got this. I know it, because it's not me speculating and reassuring you. It's saying it happened then. There's no reason why it can't happen with you too. That you can find inspiration from the past and hope for the past, so that you're fortified for the future.
Good. Mike, thank you. Also the fact that you had to do all this stuff and get in the press to do, but then go and develop photos in the dark room, which is so much easier now.
John, since Mike is going to make an attack on me now.
No. So Mike, say something you want to say by way of
there was quite a bit of humor even in the dark days. there was plenty of humor. Humor was a way to survive, and there were some wonderful stories about the security cops and what happened. But the one thing that came out of that dreadful Uitenhage massacre was one of the officers who gave commands, and I'm not too sure if it was the same guy you're talking about, had claimed at some court or some hearing, or maybe Kanama, that he'd come from Kirkwood on a Sunday and had a dry braai. And that just raised lots of eyebrows. And that was not really possible. But the thing about Molly, and you're going to go through her speeches, you're going to find very little ideological or political kind of theorizing or kind of, that kind of stuff. You're going to find just that humanism, that it's all about people. And I think that's where, when we look to the future and we're trying to find our way, that's what it's all about. We've got to find each other again and find the reasons why we believed in what we did then, and we still believe in it. And so she leads the way at the level of being a fantastic humanist as a politician and a leader.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, I'm just thinking, Tally's been sitting there listening and watching, and I want us to move the gears a little bit to say, well, what are we doing this for? Let me just summarize what happened. I've been working on this thing for 2 years. Very grateful to Molly's children and their support that they've given me in the research phase, for all the doors that they've opened. And then when I went to meeting a publisher, and I went to see Bridget Impey from Jacana Media, and she loved the story. She remembers it. Bridget Impey, by the way, is Teresa's sister.
Oh, yes, of course. Okay.
Who I happened to meet last week. Anyway, so all these interconnections, Teresa being the
Fogarty's bookshop.
Fogarty's bookshop.
You'll know that one, Mike.
I only discovered this last weekend, but anyway, just so we all know each other. So I then spoke to Bridget. She said, well, crowdfunding thing, and I've got a men's group which provides solidarity for me. He said, well, I know this person. I know, he likes the crowdfunding thing, put me onto touch with, and I met Erica Schofield, who's the CEO. And within lickety-split time, she explained to me how this thing worked, and she said, well, just go for it. Yeah. And we set a target. We got a video up there. We told them about it. So it's Molly Backburn, Thunder Fund Molly Backburn. It's quite easy to find. And we had raised the first target of 120,000 within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Because, and I just said, well, this network, this invisible network, which I talked about, the thing below the surface.
Yes.
When there's something purposeful, meaningful, and inspiring, people will respond to it. And I've been overwhelmed by it. So I went to, one of the few times as a social worker where I had to go with the problem of abundance rather than scarcity. But and what was so lovely about it is that you've got to. Eric explained to me how you got to do social media, you got to put the word out, have this follow-up story. Yeah. So I get a pledge from somebody, and I look at his name and said, hang on, I know this person. He was at varsity with me, I'm sure. Look at that tally, Karen and Paul. So I had to find myself getting hold of her and finding that she's there. So now we were students together as undergraduates, or maybe she was just starting a postgraduate. But anyway, I was doing social work, but I did more social than work. She was very hard working. She's now the Professor Emeritus at Rhodes University in Biological Sciences.
Yeah.
And then I said, just tell me, why did you pledge? And what? He said, well, I saw this leaflet of the Catholic Church in Kenton, and I immediately responded, because I heard this ballad being sung. I can't remember his name. I don't know, 20 years at the National Arts Festival, Grahamstown Festival, and I went back several times to actually listen to Anton Calitz, who now written Judy. So I remember Anton, Judy, Molly's sister. And so I thought, oh my gosh, so that's a story that's got to be told. So in this miraculous way, she connected me with somebody who we stayed in a Catholic student residence together. Yeah. And so thank you. So
yes. Well, let's say goodbye to Mike. Thank you, man. And we're going to put you backstage again, Mike, and replace you with Tally.
Okay, good. So Tally,
go.
I want to say goodbye to John.
We can still say goodbye.
Here.
He's back.
But Mike's there. I want to say goodbye to Mike.
Mike, you want to say goodbye to Mike?
Anyway, Tally, 47 years, as I said,
Welcome.
and you haven't aged a bit.
That's both kind and untrue, John, but thank you. And it's lovely. It's lovely to be here. Goodness me, listening to all of you, so very many threads. I mean, Mike and I were neighbors in Makanda in Grahamstown, so Mike, it was also splendid to see you. Really great.
Wow.
Yeah, so there I was in church on a Sunday, and I see this leaflet for Molly Backburn, and my husband Tony said, I came back and I said, I really want to do this, and he said, yeah, I'll. So he did the actual mechanical pledging of doing it, and he popped my name on. And Anton, yes, I went to you singing in the festival, and that song just absolutely hit me. And I went back several times. I have to say, you were part of the attraction. You are the only person I've ever written a fan mail note to, in which I left at the venue and invited you to supper. And I was devastated that you didn't take that up. But nevertheless, the song stayed with me. And
that's funny.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I would have. I
certainly would have gone. He was always on the bum for food. I'm surprised.
You can always come home after the goat shed on next Sunday.
Yes, I'm there. I'm there on Sunday. Will you be there, please? Because you might be the only one listening. You might be the only one listening to that song. No,
no, definitely not the only.
This
person.
song. That's.
And I was also playing there, Tally. I don't know if you know, I was also playing with him at that time as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if you didn't notice me.
But to stop him from upstaging me, we put curtains.
You put a blanket over me most of the time.
Which is much more entertaining than me. So we had to stop that. So he played percussion on it. Thank you for remembering. This thank you for remembering me, but I'm validated as a person and as a musician and as an artist. You have no idea by the fact that the song had an impact that strong on you. I know that it had a very strong impact on people that I played it to when I wrote it in '91, and I performed it around where theatres and festivals I could. I managed to perform it until about '96 to theatres and festivals overseas, on the Edinburgh Festival in '95 and '96, and there was an occasion in a pub on the west side of Ireland where I was able to play it without a sound system to a full pub of 200 people, and they kept quiet. You could have heard a pin drop, and it's a tough thing for a listener to listen to 5 verses plus choruses. It's written in an English ballad style. It's a long piece, and you've got to perform it emotively as well as have an audience that's ready to hear it. And I was so privileged along the way to be able to find those audiences and be able to play it. And I'm so proud of myself that it had an impact of you. Although you didn't remember my name.
Back.
I don't remember my damn name.
How many times you went back? But tell us a bit more about what resonated in your heart about that, Tally.
Well, if you go back to when I was at university with John, I was an undergraduate. I was at Durban Varsity from 1975. And shortly after I arrived at Varsity, I got an envelope delivered to my grandmother's flat. And I opened it, and it was very interestingly full of communist literature inviting me to find my nearest cell and to become involved in activism.
Did they offer you free supper?
and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I had no idea how it could have come to me. We lived on the beachfront, and I took a very early morning bus. Up into town. I had to take 2 buses to get up to campus. I found a city dustbin, and I deposited the material in the dustbin and went on as a nice little science student to work on environmental issues. John, also out of a wilderness school experience. And I think that in the years later, when I listened to that song, and I realized there were people who weren't frightened. There were, and I would have been a similar kind of profile to Molly Backburn. There were people who didn't just stay and study and do their thing. There were people who stood out and did things at a time when it was dangerous and when it was frightening. I later found out that I had joined Envirac, which was the New SAS Environmental Society, which was infiltrated by one Carl Edwards, and that was almost certainly how I came to get that literature. And so one wonders what would have happened if I had responded. But that sense of there are moments when you have to stand up and you have to do something, I think have certainly influenced me later on. I was enormously lucky to work with Professor Carke Asmal on writing our current Water Act, which gives an environmental right to water. And while we have struggled to implement that act, it is still a really good piece of legislation. And I think the message or the kind of thread that has gone through this evening's conversation has been about courage and integrity, and that we do find moments in our lives where it's possible to stand up. And sometimes, Anton, you stand up by singing. And I think you did that. I think those words, the messages that you carry do impact people. John, you're doing that by writing. And as we go through, if we are able to focus on the vulnerable, I think that's probably what Molly Backburn was called enormously to, is people who found themselves enormously vulnerable to an inhumane system. And we live in an age where our environment is fundamentally vulnerable to appalling systems. And so this notion of standing up for principles is what we're talking about. And thank you to all of you for that.
Gosh, Tony, that's so interesting. I can't wait to come and catch up on 48 years of narrative.
I just made a connection between Tally and the environment, because you mentioned Tally and emeritus professor, and I've realized now that the environmental focus of what her past as a academic, I hate that term, Tally, I'm sorry, but that's your vocation. It's natural science, and that is exactly the battlefield that John is on in some of the witnesses to truth that he's counseling. So I've just realized that is a solid connection.
Did you know from the Guguzakulu, Kelly? Because
no,
have you met him? You haven't. Well, that's exciting.
No,
because when I heard you were on, I mean, Sinagugu phoned me a week or so ago, and he said, "Listen, they're busy building the into Wild Coast Toll Road," and he said they are dumping all their spoils or the excavations onto a fragile wetland. And he went to the police station and he reported it. And he said, we're going to have to, he said, the police didn't want to take his affidavit, they didn't want to take the charge because exactly. And so we've now, within our movement called Sustaining the Wild Coast, we've actually kind of said, and then immediately I thought, well, here's somebody, we could get an affidavit, help you to get a specialist to say, you can't do that. By all means, build a road if you have to. It's going to facilitate economic development. But we depend on the earth for our livelihoods. And in this respect, I also want to honor Judy Chalmers, Molly's sister, who survived that tragic accident and who went on to, in fact, become a member of parliament. And she told me that she said she felt like she was one of the very few, or the only person that in parliament or the ANC at the time that really cared for the environment. And then ended up becoming the whaling commissioner, and on her portfolio she did, carried on what Molly was so good at as a provincial councillor, to make sure she dealt with education, social development, things like that. And for Judy, it was the environment too. So how do we kind of win against all these powerful forces, you say? Well, they have no answer to truth. And that's why they attack it. That's why they seek to suppress it. So that's why you get retaliation. So that's the first point in which I'm counseling people. I say, look, you got to know, and then that doesn't mean to say you just, because you claim it to be truth, you've got to be rigorous. You've got to make sure you do your homework. You've got to research it. And that's why I've been so privileged to work with people like Sinagogu and journalists like Mike Lowe, because we're all prone to our bias. And I always have to say, look, you've got to be hard on me too. Don't just make sure that we're on a solid, building your house upon rock rather than on flimsy sort of ideological aspirations. It must be solid.
My father would disagree. You must build it on sand. The Bible was wrong. Bad thing to build your house.
Really?
Sand. So not all of that stuff.
It's metaphorical. Metaphorical.
Yeah, but you mustn't mess with the. But the point is right.
Yes.
You must have a solid foundation.
Yes.
The builder would agree with that.
That's right. Yeah, well, before that concrete, they had to use rock. Anyway, but yeah, thank you, Tony. I want to suggest that we move to closure now, and the last little insert here is actually with Anton singing his some of his ballads at the very. Oh yes, okay, Angel of Mercy. Yeah, let's hear.
Okay, let's have a look.
Angel of Mercy.
And in South Africa, Molly Backburn was arrested for the second time since the state of emergency was declared there. She stands as a reminder to the outside world that there are white South Africans who oppose apartheid. Reporter Louis Friedberg recently visited Blackburn's home and prepared this profile.
A number of people who maybe feel guilty about their own attitudes use me as a whipping boy, and I'm given credit for a lot of things I haven't ever said or done.
It is a Saturday afternoon, and Molly Blackburn's living room is crowded with about a dozen residents from the black townships around Port Elizabeth. They've been at the center of much of the violence that has rocked the Eastern Cape in recent months. Blackburn's home in the affluent white suburb of Summerstrand is one of the few places township residents can go to for help and advice.
We don't know under this state of emergency because it has been stated that there's no claim, there's no...
Yeah, but that was no state of emergency. It wasn't as though there was a crowd or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a plain cold-blooded murder.
Yeah, that's a cold-blooded murder. They do think of a lawyer, but the trouble is that they have no money.
Yeah, but you know the East Cape Council of Churches, they are helping, that's number one. And then there is legal aid also. Yeah.
Blackburn is one of a small band of whites who oppose the government. She is an elected member of the Cape Provincial Council on the Progressive Federal Party ticket and is active in the Black Sash, one of South Africa's oldest anti-apartheid organizations, made up primarily of white women like herself. Blackburn has deep roots in South Africa, which is what she says keeps her going under difficult circumstances.
I've got 7 children. We've lived here in this town for 8 generations. I can't think of any other place as home. That's part of the motivation, and the other part is an anger and a dislike of little people being pushed around, an anger that law and order appears to only apply to one set of the people.
I think there's a perception overseas that if things get too hot here in South Africa, whites will just pack up and leave. Is that something you have considered or consider?
My husband and I have never really considered that as an alternative. Our roots are too deep here. I don't think we would ever leave.
Just 2 blocks away, hundreds of whites stroll on the Port Elizabeth beachfront as on any weekend afternoon. It is a hot sunny day, as it often is here in winter. The state of emergency has apparently had little impact on the town's white residents. Blackburn feels that most don't understand the underlying causes of the unrest in the townships just a few miles away.
They think that these heightened repressive measures will in fact calm things down. Maybe they will for a short while, but it's a completely artificial piece. The anger and the frustration is building up even more underneath it all. And really, I can't think of any step that could have been calculated to do more damage than this one.
For National Public Radio, this is Louis Friedberg reporting.
Now, a troubled conscience, well, that's an easy thing to find. But a person who can give you more than just sympathy, well, that person is one of a kind. Cause you see, we all know right from wrong. It's just that we're very seldom strong. When standing up for something means you have to stand up alone. But she never gave a damn. She used to say, if you hold out your hand, somebody will take it. If I can do it, anybody can. And there was no one who didn't respect her. Even the Trotskys used to let her pass. And she would never refuse a phone call if ever her help was asked. From Langa to Lingiletu, they used to offer her their beds. Now that's a pretty high honor in some places, so it's said. This is just another summertime.
Still up in spring.
Yeah. Well, Anton, discovering you thanks to Tally and this extraordinary kind of serendipity, synchronicity. I think the best word is morphic resonance. Now, I apologize to you. I love big words, but I try and use them in what they really mean, because so often we misuse words. Morphic resonance is a concept which Rupert Sheldrake came up with, and it's where things seem to converge on a commonality independently of each other in a way that you can't determine in a cause-effect relationship. And there's this example he uses. He says, like, a dog will suddenly know when their owner is about to leave the office and come home, even though, and the dog would get up and he talked about this idea that within nature, within the natural environment, that there's a consciousness that actually resides somehow in the universe that actually is looking to just, bubble up. So I have the sense that that's a good way of describing morphic resonance. Look at the puzzled look on your face. And ask you just to say...
You're a musician with words. You sing a song and it sort of entrances you. You're really good at that.
Because it was really encouraging for me to actually say, well, this is a bit of a, any precedent for how, working this thing through. So it was a really encouraging thing for me to meet a guy who could actually do it. So I wanted to ask you to just give a bit more of what you hope you can now do as a musician going forward, as a balladeer, as somebody that has got a huge talent and an intuition and a history teacher, all these things.
The fact is, with this song, which Gary calls my masterpiece, and some people say it is, but it's not in my estimation. You live forwards and you live towards that masterpiece if you're going to write something. The best is yet to come. I haven't written. You worried that you're not going to finish the biography for reasons inside and outside, and you're going to have to take your own advice and reframe your story to get that thing finished, as you know that. But when you there's a song that I've been writing for 14 years, and I can't move on until I've done it, and I've done it. I've just done it, and it's a synchronicity, and whenever you writing a piece of work as a song, you're trying to solve a problem of your own, and you're creating something to do it. You're creating that space you're talking about. You're reframing a story in that song every time you do it, or you don't, or you can't finish it. So I have found with the journey and the trauma and the loss of a soulmate and that the muscle is there, and the writing I'm capable of doing. Not only the muscle is there, and not only have I been sitting on work for 14 years and it's better than ever, and my will to live, the Molly Backburn song wrote itself. I didn't write it. There were templates that I'd followed that Bob Dylan. If you write songs, you cannot study or listen to Dylan. There's your Shakespeare as a songwriter. You don't get to write English or understand it if you don't study your Shakespeare as hard as you can. You don't get to write songs unless you listen to Dylan as hard and as wide and as deep as you can. The song wrote itself. The English ballad form that he'd taken forward into the 20th century was right there for me. There were 3 ballads that he wrote that could quite easily were templates, and I can name them. But after doing the talking to the people that you've also spoken to, which we found that you'd spoken to all the people that I'd more actually than I'd spoken to, except that I spoke to them 35 years ago. Fortunately, most of them are still here. But after doing the research, I went to the beach with a bottle of something. I did not try to write that song until I'd finished speaking to everybody, because by the time I'd made up my mind, by the time I start writing that song on the beach in the sun, a nice beach on a nice day, it's going to be done.
Yeah.
By the time I walk on, I've never written a song like that before or after, but I knew that it was going to have rhyming quatrains. It was going to take as long as it took. It was going to be anything between 2 and 17 verses,
yes.
Which is, Dylan Brown's Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands is like 27 minutes long. It's just one song. So you have all the framework, the structure ready to go. And it wrote itself.
Yeah.
And then the song that is mine wrote my life.
Yeah.
It got me studied. It got me out of failure. It was my entrance into being a teacher. It was my passage along the way. And it will likely be my passage forward in teaching or beyond. So I wrote the song, and then the song wrote me.
Yeah. Amazing. And at that time, as a drummer, percussionist, always had a lot of pride doing your stuff in general, because I'm
glad to hear that, because I'm going to waste a whole lot of time with all the new stuff.
I know. I didn't say you didn't take advantage of me all the time.
If you thought that was abuse, you're going to get.
But listen, there are a lot of comments as well. And Gary said you wrote a song to make the whole world sing. Absolutely.
He would say some. Try.
Let's have a look at some of these comments. I don't know if you want to do that right now, Gary, but there's a lot of people are saying hello online, and it's lovely to see. Alison Johnson, hi there. And she said she's proud of Anton. And Wendy Dewberry, lovely to see you, Wendy, online. Wendy, I remember that name from way back. Lovely.
Ellie, keep that safe space in mind. Eh?
Okay, there we go. Tracy DeBlanche is so excited about this book.
Okay, now Tracy is the other distributor that mustn't be overlooked. She's Bargain Books.
Oh, Bargain Books.
And I made damn sure she was here.
Excellent, Tracy.
So part of next year, I'm just saying she'll be a stalwart and a stall holder.
Excellent.
She will arrange the table.
Brilliant for the book signing. And Tracy, I see Alison. Is it Alison Tucker? Yes, difficult to bear.
Soulful beauty
Can I
of the
lend you a
wild
contact
coast.
lens?
Yeah, I know. I need one from here. Yeah.
She just
the wild coast. Oh, that's good. Alison and Tracy, thank you so much for these lovely comments, man.
There's Silka. Remember Silka?
Silka?
You remember Silka?
I don't.
There's my aunt.
And Nikki.
There's my auntie. Yes, I can't read them.
Nikki, and I see Janet there as well.
Is Janet just below Nikki?
Yes, I see.
Wow.
It's Janet's kids. The right thing to do. The right thing to do. You're right. It's so that. I think that's just the thing. It's such a simple decision, actually, but it's become so hard.
Yeah, but John's going to
talk
talk about
against you.
John's going to talk about the point of what I call a tipping point, but for Molly Backburn, Simpiwe Mkulu, which is also similar to your tipping point with the what Synagogue was.
Well, like Sukka's saying here, it's emphasis on humanism. Feels so nice and homely.
Mental.
Yeah. Good. So we're seeing all these lovely connections being made. I'm just looking for one from my wife saying,
Chris,
you don't have another 14 years to finish this book.
It's Chris Thexton. Chris, stop.
He hasn't.
Thexton, all the way from America as well.
Yeah, he's the bass line in case
he's the bass player for a lot of the stuff we do.
On the one on Spotify that I've put of that song, he's the bass player and you're the drummer in case you did
Yes.
the wrong note.
No, we'll be
My
doing
song's
it.
on Spotify now with you two playing.
We are on Spotify with him, Chris. You know, he even seems to be quite proud that we're part of it, even though he moans such a lot, you know.
Yeah, I wrote and recorded it in 1991, and I dropped it on Spotify last week.
In the last week, it took nearly 40 years for him to put it on Spotify.
My first song I dropped on Spotify last week was this song.
Encourages one to stand
And you
up.
are
For what's,
on it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, there. Encourages one to stand up for what's morally correct. So many times you have to, you know, you've got that decision to make.
Yeah, she works at the CCMA. I'm going.
Oh, there we go. Lee Davins. Amazing to listen to. A morphic resonance for me as well, she says.
Oh, good. Another Sheldrake.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, no. They're hanging in there for royalties, Chris says. Me too, Chris.
Yeah.
Me too. But we get nothing.
No, you do. You give your children are going to get nothing except. I've just said, Luke, you're getting nothing, but you can have all the copyrights to my songs. He's happy.
Excellent.
So far, he's happy with that.
Okay.
He doesn't know he's going to have to pay in.
We're going to have to pay in for that stuff. Oh man.
Good.
Okay.
Well,
John is now irritated at our joke.
No, I'm not. I'm just sort of feeling like you
should
didn't
get
give me any lunch, dinner. I'm hungry.
I gave you eggs and bacon. What else do you want?
Stomach's rumbling here. We're going to
No,
have something to eat.
no, it's been lovely. I mean, how's this possible? Literally, it's been a little over a week ago that we first talked on the phone, and we're carrying on like we're old friends. And there's a lovely saying which Raymond Panikar says. He says, a human being is a knot in a network of relationships. And that knots, and as these sort of knots collect, they form a kind of a net. And that net is that what then becomes a safety net. It becomes a means of holding us so that we can continue to live our lives forward. And it resonates beautifully with a quote from William Faulkner, Requiem to a Nun. Now, he was a U.S. writer.
He was a jurist as well. If I'm not mistaken, I often am. But he's one of those very powerful writers who's Oliver Wendell Holmes' contemporary, if I'm not mistaken. He's in that league.
Really good.
Of course, I could be talking out the back of my head. But you're the author.
That's exciting because I've always had Oliver Wendell Holmes' insight, where he talks about. Anyway, let's not bore you, but let me just kind of move to closure with this quote. It says, William Faulkner in Requiem to a Nun. And this came also out of that men's group that I was talking to, and they were watching as well. The past is never dead. It's not even past. All of us labor in webs spun long before we were born. Webs of heredity and environment, of desire and consequence, of history and eternity. Yeah, that's for me has been one of those thoughts that I can meditate on endlessly.
I think what you've hit on is is the debate of what is history, why is history, is there such a thing as history? The fact that the past and the present and the divide, the way that you would write history, what point of view do you take with history? We spoke earlier, we debated this, and many great authors, writers, of historians and novelists. Charles Dickens, Tolstoy were all students of history, but they never wrote history. They wrote fiction based on history. And you have, to my understanding, that's what you've hit on here. How do you write history? What is history? What's its importance? And how do you chronicle it? And you are a historian in the sense that you're writing a biography of an iconic person who doesn't fit into any particular box. She wasn't an idealist. She wasn't a revolutionary. She wasn't
comrade. And
she wasn't a comrade, and yet she offered a safe space to many who were. And for that reason, she was as dangerous, if not more dangerous, to what you've called the asymmetrical power structure, the regime, the apartheid government, whatever you want to call it, and that hasn't gone away. In the sense that there's always going to be the adversity of the authority. There's always going to be a need for tellers to truth, and tellers to truth like Blackburn knew that, and you are wearing very similar shoes to her, and so are all of the people you're counseling. And what I think you've reflected on is what history is and how you should write it, as you are writing a biography, and you are also struggling with that dilemma of how should I write this, how should I finish this?
I mean, I've just learned another thing from another mystic, Anton Calitz, all these Jesuits. He said, it's common to oppose...
Goddamn Catholics.
No, anyway, it's common to oppose a truth, but impossible to resist a story. And what I'd want to... what my sort of aspiration is as I've written this is to actually say, well, here is a story that is in itself compelling. It's not fictional, and I don't have to risk, anybody, because she was killed 40 years ago. It's very painful for people who loved her, people, her family, very traumatizing. But what for me is saying that if you now, with the benefit of hindsight, looking back on history with that exact science of hindsight, and you plot all those actual historical facts, well, it's not a binary of it. Either you write a biography or history. It makes an even better story because all those points are there on the map. And that's what I'm just, so excited about. And then what you see in terms of what Faulkner says, the patterns seem to repeat themselves. And for me, when I say we're talking about, and I wonder if people ask me, what's your next book going to be? I don't know. I think it's something to do with, we talk about people speak truth to power.
You said it was going to be about me.
I'm interested in the truth about power.
Yeah.
What is it that when people acquire power, they seem to get intoxicated by it, and they end up sort of abusing it?
There was something you said about there's an actual process, a neurotransmitter process of the power that dopamine enhancement, and there's a predisposition, according to that theory, of tyrants, and I think it was what was that?
Well, I've also on my Substack there's a post I put recently about that whole dynamic. So I don't want to bore people to tears with that.
No, but if I can put it into common speak, it was the idea that people actually cross over to become obsessed with power because it's actually a dopamine rush. So it's part of a dopamine addiction, and according to that theory from that neuroscientist, the dopamine affects a left brain preponderance rather than what we would prefer. Sudden rush of the blood of the head to the right brain, which Gary occasionally has when he sees when the seesaw flips that way, and he becomes super creative. Which we could only hope for all of us that we turn that tap on and off. But the people that are obsessed with power, your Caligulas, your people at your apartheid regime, the current corporates that are in mining that you fight, they fed their quest for power is fed by a simple neurotransmitter process with an addiction to dopamine, according to that neuroscientist. But how does that link to your work?
Well,
both as a counsellor and as a writer.
My concern is that people who acquire power abuse it and retaliate against the small and the defenseless and the vulnerable. As a social worker, it's not just I'm professionally obliged to ensure that people who are bullied and who experience this thing are protected. And that's my code of practice.
But protected how?
Protected from that. So that's why we need the media. That's why we need institutional supports for them. That's why we need commissions like the Human Rights Commission and all the rest. We need to have those.
But you mentioned reframing your own story.
That's the external segment. And then the internal kind of environment, if we can call it, internal consciousness of knowing that you are embarking on a path which is what has in fact driven history forward, when people have refused to simply acquiesce to a dominant narrative or a dominant power interest. And that for me is in the sense saying, well, one of the ways we do is we need people to imitate. We need role models. And that's why for me, Molly's been one which I've had the privilege to actually get to research and find it actually relevant, because she had this ability to, people say she wasn't a politician in the sense she didn't have an ambition for power. She took that strategically. She had the background and the circumstances, but she just did. She saw her influence, her relative influence, as a means to serve people. And unfortunately, you have, that just is very rare. As soon as people acquire power, what the particular ideological sort of interest is, it has an effect. And part of my concern is the larger thing is to prevent that happening. I would like to see every political party actually having mechanisms to ensure that the people that get as candidates come and see me first, and I will do a psychological and social work assessment to see whether they show the propensity of being somebody who ends up becoming, somebody that. Because what happens with the dopamine thing, just to explain this, is that we all have our blind spots, but they don't show up as dark patterns.